Hello again, Year 9. So today we're going to carry on with our study of what life was like in Nazi Germany. If you recall, we've been looking at some of the film of life in Nazi Germany. We've been starting to gather evidence about life in Nazi Germany, and we've started to understand why some people completely supported the Nazis, whilst others tried to stand up against them. And today we're going to focus on an area that you'll be very familiar with, because we're going to look at this area here, young people, and what it was like to be people of your age during the years 1933 to 1945 in Nazi Germany. So we've already looked at propaganda and censorship, we've already looked at terror. Today it's young people, and when we've finished looking through the slides and watching the film that I've got for you today, you'll then be putting some information in the bottom left hand corner of your diagram. But remember, don't write anything in there for the time being. All the notes I want you to take over the next few minutes from my slides and from the film need to go in the back of your book. So if you want to turn to the back of your book, and we'll start to talk about young people and their life in Nazi Germany. You've already seen this poster here. It says that young people serve the Führer at the top, and at the bottom, all 10-year-olds in the HJ. And the HJ stood for Hitler Jugend, or Hitler Youth. And it was an organisation that the Nazis set up actually in the 1920s. But by the time Hitler came to power, it had become a very, very big organisation. And the idea was that young boys would join this organisation, and it would be like the Scouts. They would get a uniform, they would go on camps, they would play sport, they would learn survival skills and so on. And to them it was very exciting, and so a lot of boys would join simply because it was a chance to do things that they couldn't afford to do otherwise. A lot of others would join because they were just swept along with it all, because their mates were joining. But a lot of people also joined because to not join was to be left out. You might be bullied at school for it, or you might be your family might be insulted. People would ask questions why some people didn't join the Hitler Youth. So a lot of people joined because everybody else did. And because of this, by 1936 there were 5 million members of the Hitler Youth. All young lads aged 10 to 18, all of them going on these camps, learning sports and survival skills, and basically being trained to be soldiers without them actually realising it all, that when they came out at 18 they'd be ready to fight a war. Eventually the Hitler Youth became compulsory. By 1939 everybody had to join, and so by 1940 it reached a peak of 8 million members, one of the biggest youth organisations in the world. But while all of these boys were there for the fun and the sports and the friendship, they were also being brainwashed. They were being given Nazi ideas and Nazi views, and they were being trained to be soldiers. So a war machine was being made through a youth organisation that was pretending to be the Boy Scouts. Now you might ask yourself, well, what did girls get up to then? Well, at the same time, there was a group for them, and this was called the League of German Maidens. And these 3 girls here are all members of the League of German Maidens. And they had a uniform, and they would have camps as well, and they would have classes and sports. But unlike the boys who were being trained to be soldiers, the girls were being trained to be wives and mothers. They were getting them ready for a life of being a housewife, basically, to bring up the next generation of German boys and girls. So whilst the boys were being trained for war, the women were being trained to be wives and mothers, and all of their classes and all of their activities would be getting them ready to find themselves a husband and then to have a large family and to boost Germany's population. Schools were the same. Schools were a way of getting inside children's heads, and so this is a timetable from a girls' school in Nazi Germany in 1935. One difference you'll see is that at the top they went to school 6 days a week, but it starts pretty regularly. I mean, it's a German school and they're teaching them German. Okay, fair enough. Second lesson of the day, well, each day they have geography or history or singing. Geography, history or singing. So geography and history are pretty similar, except of course the history would be the history that the Nazis would want you to know. So they would be telling you how great the German Empire had been in the 1800s and how awful the Treaty of Versailles was. It would be the Nazi version of history, and how Germany must get its revenge. The singing, it would either be traditional German songs or songs praising Hitler and the Nazis. But then things started to turn even more dark after period 2, because period 3 is race study or party beliefs. So they would be teaching the girls racist views about different groups and different societies around the world. They would be getting inside their heads, and they would be telling them that the best race in the world were the Aryans, the white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Northern Europeans, of whom the Germans were part, and they would be told that as fact. And on Fridays and Saturdays, they would have Nazi party beliefs taught to them as facts. Not a debate, not a discussion of different politics, but that the Nazis are right and everybody else is wrong. Then they would have a break, followed by domestic science with mathematics. So they wouldn't get a separate maths lesson just to learn maths. They would be taught domestic science, which is basically how to run a home, and there'd be a bit of mathematics in there. So it might be to do with weighing out ingredients, or about how much food to buy for the family, or how to budget for the week for the family. But all the maths would be based around being a wife and being a mother. Then the science of breeding, eugenics, health biology. They would be preparing these girls to become mothers, and they would be teaching them about different races and about pregnancy and about bringing up children, all as fact. All the views of the Nazis put down as scientific facts that the girls would hear and therefore believe, because it was their teachers who were telling them all these things. And then after that, 2 till 6, sport each day to get these girls to be strong and healthy, because they wanted them to have lots of children. That was a timetable that a girl would go through. Last of all, before you watch the film, they also used children's books to get their views across. In this picture here from a children's book, there is a man who's giving some young children sweets, but then he says at the bottom that if they take the sweets, then they've got to come away with him. So he's basically trying to abduct these children. But the point here is that the person in the picture has been drawn in a particular way that Germans would look at that and see him straight away as a Jewish person. They've tried to exaggerate certain features in the character to make it clear to German children that this is a Jewish person, and if they saw this again and again and again, they would assume that all Jewish people wanted to abduct children. All Jewish people were evil, all Jewish people were criminals. The Jewish people were always the baddies, they were always the villains, and the children's books told them this again and again and again, and children would then grow up believing all of that all Jewish people were dangerous and people to be avoided, people who should be arrested. The children's books told them that, and it was given to them so many times that it just brainwashed them, and it turned the German children against their Jewish friends and their Jewish neighbours, people who they'd gone to school with or lived nearby, to suddenly became the enemy because of the way they were told again and again that these people are evil. And they were told it so many times they started to believe it. So there's some information about how young people were treated in Nazi Germany. There's now a film for you to watch. There's a link through the PowerPoint and the PDF. There's also a straight link from Synergy to the film about youth in Nazi Germany. It's a really interesting one because it's narrated by a guy called Henry Mettelman, who was actually a member of the Hitler Youth. And he speaks incredibly good English. He's got quite a strong accent, so it takes a minute or two just to get tuned into how he speaks, but you'll get it very quickly, and it's so fascinating listening to what he's got to say about what his life was like growing up as a young lad in Germany, and then himself becoming a soldier later on. So watch the film. When you've taken a few notes on the film as well, you'll then be able to go back to the diagram and write in this space here 10 things you've learned today about the lives of young people in Nazi Germany. As always, if you're struggling with it, just drop me a line and I'll see what I can do to help you out. But the hope is that by the end of this session, you'll have 10 facts in here, 10 facts in here, and 10 facts in here. And then next lesson, we can go on to look at how the Nazis treated minorities. Although we've already talked about that today with the way that they were already brainwashing the children to tell them that the Jewish people were responsible for everything that had ever gone wrong. Even though it wasn't true, they told the children it so many times, they started to believe it.